Can I beat the Wind Waker with only 3 hearts? Let's find out.
I have 2 days to get through Legend of Zelda, the Wind Waker. I can only have 3 hearts though, so that's the challenge. Now, I'm gonna be honest with you here. I'm a little nervous because if I can't get this done in 2 days, I gotta get a tramp stamp, so kind of don't want to do that.
With that in mind, I hit the ground running, finishing everything in Outset Island in about 30 minutes. Then, I made it through the Forsaken Fortress in another 30. After that, I picked up the sail and headed towards our first dungeon, Dragon Roost Cavern. But before that, I got one of the most important items in the game, the empty bottle. There would be 4 of these throughout the game, and I'll need all of them to finish, because they hold fairies, which revive you when you die. A valuable commodity, especially when you only have 3 hearts. With my newfound bottle in hand, I started making my way through the cavern, taking the odd hit, but overall handling it all right. Until I got to Goma and got bodied hard.
If I keep playing like I played in that fight, man, we're in trouble. That really concerns me, because if I'm having trouble with the first fight, I'm gonna have trouble with the second and the third and the fourth and the fifth.
But I picked myself back up and headed back in, taking out Goma, only losing half a heart. But instead of picking up the heart container, I went through the warp and got Din's Pearl. Meaning, from this point in the game, I had less hearts than the developers intended. So, I had to play it carefully. Especially now that I made it to the Forbidden Woods, where the enemies were craftier. Luckily, this is also where you pick up the boomerang, which was a massive help. Stunning enemies, and most importantly, keeping them at bay. After all, I can't rush into every fight if I'm going to have a chance at completing this. I kept up the pace until I was face to face with Kel Demos, who I took down easily. Now it was time to hit the seas, but this time we wouldn't be stopping right away to the next dungeon, because we needed bombs. So it was back to Windfall Island to steal them from the pirates. Afterwards, it was time to beef Link up a bit, so I went for the Great Fairies, fully upgrading my magic, rubies, and bombs, and picking up another 2 bottles.
Basically what we're doing right now is doing all the setup so that I can blast through the end game. I've only beat the end game once. To me, this game ends after the Wind Temple, so it's really going to come down to the Triforce quests. So I'm trying to get everything kind of all situated so that I don't struggle there. But right now we've got our first real test of the run, and that's the Tower of Gods.
And this would be a test, with enemies that I needed to keep at a distance. So I had to utilize my items and get a little creative. But I made it through, even taking out the first Dark Knight of the game without getting hit. But that would change once I made it to Godan, who got me to run out of arrows and down to my last heart, but I managed to sneak out a win.
Now we're at Hyrule Castle. This is the part that I'm really nervous about, is basically we're gonna have the room full of just big, hefty enemies there, monsters there, whatever you want to call them, right? And I could see myself wiping a couple times.
I had to be careful here, as there was a room full of, at what this point in the game, were mini-bosses. And they could take half a heart in one swing. So, I immediately got out of the center and moved up to the second floor, so I could take out the monsters individually and not get swarmed. It also acted as a safe area that I could and would retreat to when things were getting a little too hairy. With these guerrilla tactics, I managed to get through on my first try in only about 12 minutes, which blew me away, as I remember wiping to that room constantly as a kid. With the newfound confidence that wiping out a room full of Darknuts and Moblins can only provide, I headed straight into the Forsaken Fortress, taking out Phantom Ganon without even getting hit, and taking out the Helmarok King, only losing a quarter of a heart.
Yeah, we're doing pretty good. That means 3 more dungeons, Wind, Earth, and Ganon's Tower, and of course the Triforce quest. But honestly, I'm really happy with where we're at.
But before I took on the Earth Temple, I needed to catch up on sleep. So I took a power nap, then got back to it. After I woke up, it was time to buff up Link again. So I upgraded my arrows, got the Ballad of Gales, and got the last bottle. With that out of the way, I was ready to take on my favorite temple in the game, the Earth Temple. What's your favorite temple? Let me know in the comments. And while you're there, if you could like and sub, I'd really appreciate it. These videos take dozens of hours of work, and while I'm happy to do it, the likes and subs kind of show me that I'm on the right track. So, thanks in advance. The Earth Temple definitely took the longest so far, between controlling Medley and really having to play defensive with the enemies, between the Floor Masters, Redeads, and Stalfos. But hey, that's what bombs are for, right? Eventually, it was time to take on Jalhalla, who I took a couple hits from, but was more annoying than difficult.
I promise I thought this was hard. I've played the Wind Waker probably a dozen times. I beat it once. Because for me, the Wind Waker is over when you finish the Wind Temple. So I'm not. The Triforce stuff, I think, is going to slow me down. I don't think it's going to stop me. Ganon's Tower makes me nervous, but you know, I've got some time here.
And I would need that time, as the Wind Temple was by far the game's most tedious, as navigation became a huge problem with myself getting turned around constantly in the main room of the temple. On top of that, I really struggled with the Wizrobe mini-boss fight, having to use a ferry to get through. By the time I got to Mulgara, I was ready to be done with this temple, which I was after slaying the boss, only taking a couple of hits.
Now we're getting into Uncharted Waters. I've done the Triforce quest once, and that's when I was a kid, and honestly, it is so bad that I generally stop playing the game.
When I say bad, trust me, I mean bad. In order to make it to Ganon's Tower, I had to find 8 Triforce charts, which are scattered throughout the map. Then, I had to pay 398 rubies per map to get them decoded. After that, I have to use that chart to find the Triforce shards at the bottom of the sea and fish them up. This is the reason I've only beaten this game once, and it was so bad that they actually changed it in the HD remake. But since I'm playing the Gamecube version, I have to do all of it. That said, I have over 24 hours to do this, and I've been stockpiling rubies since the Forbidden Woods. I've also been collecting all the joy pendants I'd need to get the Cabana Deed, so I wouldn't have to grind for that either. And that's where I started, making it through easily the best mini dungeon in the game, really without any trouble. Then it was back to Outset Island to take on the Savage Labyrinth, which was easily the most difficult of all the charts, as I had to make it through 30 floors of monsters. While I definitely took my fair share of hits, I still managed to make it through without using a ferry and only having half a heart left. Then I got the 2 boat-related charts for breaking into the Steel Fortress and taking out the Golden Battleship, which I did just by blitzing both. Afterwards, I controlled a seagull and dodged some birds for my next chart. For the next 2, I basically had to complete 2 enemy gauntlets, which costed me a ferry at the end of each of them when I was taking on the Darknuts, but past that, went pretty well. That left the Ghost Ship, which, after I found the Ghost Ship chart, went smoothly. But we weren't done yet, because now I had to get them decoded and find them all, which I did methodically. But as I collected my final shard, a new thought entered my head.
I want to see if I can beat it today. So before 2:45. Because, I mean, clearly I'm gonna win, so let's raise the stakes a little bit. We'll see how it goes. I'll be honest, I thought this would be harder. Here's the thing. We're at the last stage where I've done this once, and I do not remember Ganon's whatever it is. But I still have my guidebook from when I was like, I don't know, 7. So I got this.
With that, I headed back to Hyrule Castle and made my way to Ganon's Tower, which would test me on everything I've learned so far. The first test was the boss rematch gauntlet. I decided to take on the bosses in the order that I fought them, and minus losing a fairy to Mulgara, I took them down without incident.
This is starting to get a little trickier. One fairy down, and I don't know that I can replenish these fairies as easily right now, so every fairy I lose is a lot more valuable.
I could have returned to the overworld at this point, but I decided to press on. After all, I've come this far. It was time to put up or shut up. It was time to take on Phantom Ganon, who I'd have to beat over and over again until I got out of Ganon's labyrinth. Phantom Ganon was relentless, and I felt my endurance fade as he just kept coming, ultimately costing me another fairy as the fight progressed. After what felt like forever, I finally got the light arrows and took down Phantom Ganon. Now, it was time to rescue the princess. But first, I picked up an extra fairy for my next boss fight with Puppet Ganon, who had 3 phases which grew more and more annoying as the fight went on. The puppet form went down easy. The tarantula form was more annoying than difficult, and the snake form, while chaotic, went down with a couple of lucky shots. And with that, all that was left was to climb the rafters and face my final challenge. I refilled my fairies before I confronted Ganondorf, but I wasn't nervous, because throughout my journey, above and below the sea, I had proven to myself, time after time, that I was capable enough to do this. So, I went in and started the fight, which only lasted 3 minutes. In that time, Ganondorf had managed to take me down to my last fairy. But I held my own, matching him blow for blow, until ultimately I was able to defeat the tyrant and complete the challenge a full day faster than I ever thought I could.
Just a final thought before we go here. I didn't know if I could do this or not, but I tried it, right? And turns out I could, and I did, right? And I think it kind of just goes to show that if you don't try new things, if you don't come up with a challenge and try to achieve that challenge, a good goal or whatever, right? How do you know if you could do it or not? Before today, I would have said that there's no way I could have done this. And yeah, I surprised myself. So, you know, just wanted to throw that in there because, you know, I think it just goes to show that you're always a little bit better than you think you are. But anyway, I'm gonna get going. You have a good night.